I like it.
I have at least 2 takes.
That was really good.
Yeah.
I feel like your tonality is amazing. Like, have you ever tried doing like audiobooks? Like
No,
reading
but I
audiobooks
want
for
to in
Audible?
the future. Yeah.
You can make a ton of money on Audible books. I'm gonna do some research and see if I get into it, and then we could both, and you can help me with my tonality or whatever.
So you have what? So this is on the reverse. I don't know how we're recording. Who knows? Maybe we'll keep this for future content. I don't.
If you want to practice, the camera's already set. So if you press return,
Okay.
that comes onto my camera. If you press
Okay.
return again, that's now on yours. So yeah, we can play around. Go ahead.
Okay. So like going on the reverse, Angel, who's been a great help here on the Collab Studio, has been showing me kind of the ins and outs on the podcasting side in terms of actually producing our episodes for this season of These Are Questions. And the studio helped do the podcast here for season 6 as well, so greatly appreciate it. But kind of on the reverse, he wanted to know more about the tonality of like how you be as a podcast producer and as a host creating the actual episode. And I feel like everything when it comes to podcasting comes down to structure and base within your structure and knowing when to enunciate and pronunciate and provide that tone and kind of have a level as like a roller coaster going up and down with the tonality and how you want to structure for the show itself, but also in the sense of creating and knowing when to go up, when to dial down, and knowing your own interpersonal voice. And the best way to do that is through like voicing techniques and voice acting techniques and like being comfortable with your way you sound and the way you speak and how you have that conversation with each other. My background comes from a public speaking background, so like I'm certified and trained to teaching the art of public speaking, and we're doing it indirectly right now for this podcast setting because public speaking in general is all about just talking. Okay, so Angel, please talk for a second here. Just say anything.
Yeah, no, I love to talk, so no big deal there.
Yeah,
just
so-
make sure you hit return so it goes on to me. Yeah, there you go. That's the tricky.
That's the tricky part because I'm in the middle of this impromptu episode right now.
Yeah, because what happens is you get into whatever you're saying, right, and going into public speaking, and I always had an issue with thinking of like what was next. My biggest tell, and I'm going to show everyone now, the whole world is going to see, that whenever I'm holding my finger, it's a bookmark placeholder for me to know where I'm going next. It allows me to listen to you without losing where I am. And it's a physical marker for me. A lot of presenters have that. Like Bill Clinton used to hold a paperclip when he did his presentations. A lot of people don't know that. But some presenters have physical totems just to keep them on track, keep them in tune in the conversation. It's hard to be in the conversation and know what you're going to go to next. But whenever you're a host, you almost have to listen to the responses of the guest, but also know, okay, where am I going to go next in this conversation? Is there something that the guest said that I can take to go next? Or is there something in my guide or my script that I need to make sure I go to next? In your case, and these are questions, you have a script, and there are things that you got to make sure you go through. So sometimes you could get caught in the conversation and forget. So you do a really good job at looking through the script. Now adding that additional challenge of that enter or return button is going to be very interesting. Maybe on the script you put hit return.
I hit it now, so we're good. As you're laughing along, and it's funny you mentioned about those kind of techniques because that's a big part of my public speaking, especially when it comes to podcasting. I try to be as structured as possible and like have that flexibility within my structure. And if you ever notice, a lot of my episodes have a pen, right? I'm usually like dialing with a pen there. That's kind of my way of like cueing myself for certain things. And like you'll see me like actively listening as I'm going along with everyone's questions and their answers, and I'm making notes as I'm going along the script. If you see me write down stuff, it's writing down cues. And like I can write down, be like, okay, this question's going a little too long or too slow or too fast, whatever. Or if there's a question that I was going to answer for future, or excuse me, the guest was going to answer for future, and they answered it through their just speaking, I'll cross it off and I'll redirect.
Interesting.
So like a little bit of behind the scenes. I guess this is the These Are Questions behind the scenes episode. I don't know what we're going to call this. Maybe we'll use this, maybe we won't. I don't know. But like a little behind the scenes under the curtain. I have it to where I usually do typically 9 to 10 questions. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Depends on the guests and what's going on. And I'll keep it very open-ended. So I give the guests flexibility and room to say what they need to say, tell their story, do what they want to do. And then I'm listening and I'm making active changes in my brain and also in the script itself. So I don't follow it exactly to a T. And a lot of times, just like any plans get ripped apart, changed apart. So I as a good podcast host, I absolutely want to listen, and I control it like a maestro. I control it up and down, left and right. I flow it up and down as I go around, and I make sure that I have your crescendo and you have your climax. And I make sure I kind of open end back and forth with the questions.
That's interesting because like
Got it.
You got it. So coming from like I didn't go into formal public speaking training until 5 years after being exposed to having to host like group sessions. So for me, I learned organically just going off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I was put in scenarios where I had to improv. I was able to prepare. Was able to do research on some things, but imagine me being at a workshop or a training center and 5 people coming from various age groups and having various interests in what they want to learn, all tell me what they would want to learn. And within that conversation, me build an agenda that I will teach them what they came to learn. That is so a little bit like Inception, kind of. But the idea was that, like, being put into those scenarios where I didn't know what I was going to say. I had fundamental knowledge of what I could say, but I didn't know what the audience wanted, what expectations they had of me, how I could meet those expectations, and so on and so forth. So I spent a lot of my time just going off the top of my head, like no matter what it was. I got so good at it that I was able to kind of see the words come in front of me. So I could connect the dots, like as I'm doing right now. I didn't know I was planning on saying this, but I can, as I'm saying the conversation, I'm logically having a conversation with myself and trying to kind of like get the point across. I say all of that to kind of transition and say your formal training in production and broadcast media and your ability to use scripts is something that I feel like I want to implement in my journey and adapt in the way that I speak. In shows and maybe public speeches that I do. But I also try to convey my experiences to like my clients, students, and things like that. So like what recommendations you have? That was like a long-winded way of me saying, what recommendations do you have to someone that maybe they're good at talking and just having a conversation with people, but they want to implement some structure into their show. Just so then that way they can have a better, more cohesive podcast. That's it.
Okay, I'm good. I'm learning the return
You're
button.
learning it.
I'm learning it. So I'm going to be like boom, boom, boom. Great questions, and I'm more than happy to answer that. So in terms of what you're seeing, in terms of like the script itself, it's very generic for I do for this show because I try to keep it open-ended. But most traditional like TV scripts, podcast scripts, depending on what the guest is and what they're doing, it's usually a lot more stricter than what I have. I keep it more open-ended on purpose to fit my needs for the specific show. But let's say you're on a television set and you have an actual script. There's pages upon pages upon pages of everything, and you break down. You have a rundown sheet separately, but then you have the actual formal script. And like, if you don't have the money or the tools, Word can be a great opener because they have script templates. However, you don't want to use that because there's professional softwares and scripts to use when you're actually doing formal sets. One I recommend is Celtics. It's, how the exact spelling? It's like CELITX, and that's one example of a great script software that a lot of active professionals use. And that one breaks it down piece by piece by piece. But you do have to pay for it. If you're just starting out, you don't need the greatest tools in the world. You just need to start. Think of like the basic structure of like an essay. You have your beginning, your middle, and then your conclusion. Think about that when you're producing a show. You have your opening, you have your body, and then you have your conclusion. And your opening and your conclusion should be both very strong in different ways. Your opener should introduce our guests and be like, "Hi, my name's Stephen Rafferty, and you're watching These Are Questions, the interview show where I ask people questions about things, life, and such not." Going along with that, which will precede to your body, which is your whole meat of the actual show, and then you have your conclusion, which your conclusion should also be strong. If your viewers are watching you / listening to you throughout the entire episode, you want to make sure your conclusion is wrapping along your intro and your body, but also drives home. Your last question should be just as important, if not more, as your first question. Your first question reels it in, your last question stays intact, and then sets you up for future episodes. So your viewers can watch / listen to your other episodes. Yeah. Your body is the fun part. That's the one where you can play around.
Play around and kind of...
Wait, hold on. Turn back.
Yeah. Now, the beauty of this this system that I'm showing you, like, so you're walking us through implementing scripts into your shows. And you use one, but you're telling us that sometimes there's room for play, there's room to kind of change the plan up. And then you personally, you take your pen and you're notating things that you can adapt along the way. Now, summarizing, you now finalize on a software that I learned back when I was in high school. So Celtics is it's a legacy software for script writing. A lot of people have used it. I feel like nowadays there's also some additional tools available that are disrupting everything. And obviously, I'm alluding to AI. But the idea of knowing the format, I think, is what will help people that are watching this. So instead of just us regurgitating, use AI, let's use AI a little bit more intelligently. Because AI is not as smart as everyone's talking it up to be. Yes, it can give you answers, but it needs the human element. The human, I think, has to guide it. So if you are going to use AI or ChatGPT to make a script, I think that learning what the formats, like you just said, like there's certain formats that a movie script should look like, or there's certain formats that maybe a TV show script should look like. Maybe asking the AI to form you a script in relationship to that knowledge. And it can do that. It can give you the same style, and it'll look identical to what Celtics looks like. You imagine back in the day when our teachers used to tell us, you have to pay attention because you can't do this without this. Yeah, guess what? They're all eating their words now. But it's all right. I digress. The idea or the moral of this is to use something. Whether you're using a formal script layout, or whether you're using an outline, or whether you just have a note or a napkin with something. It's structure, right? You have an intro, you have a body, you have some sort of review, and then you end it. And then you could get creative with how you do that. So I think you do a very cool job at doing that by applying a lot of different elements of getting attention. That's what I want to define it as. Because your introduction gets my attention. Then you have this section or segment inside of your show where you ask me really silly questions that have nothing to do with your show. But it gets me like out of the thought process of like, hey, we're having a formal podcast. And it allows me to play. I look forward to the random questions because I feel like I cannot be serious in that point. Or maybe I can be like I did when I made a debut and didn't know what coaches were.
Our viewers remember that from season 6, episode 1 with you and Durania. So we remember that very closely there. And it's great you mentioned that because like the premise of These Are Questions was there was 2 ideas for it. One was to create a podcast / show to be in the vein of like a talk show. So like a little bit about my background very briefly. And for those who know, they know. For those who don't know, I'm more happy to oblige and tell that information. I was inspired by a lot of late night hosts such as Conan O'Brien, Jimmy Fallon when he first started, David Letterman, even Leno back in the day, even, Carson, and I always liked the premise of having a one-on-one conversation with a guest and like getting the best out of them from a promotional standpoint, a brand standpoint, but also from a humanistic standpoint. So I wanted to dive into that, and I wanted to focus on talent that were established, that were up and coming, and that were also unknown. I wanted to have a good mix of everything. 1, because it just elevates the show itself, but 2, because especially for the ones that were more on the lesser known, they may not get an interview, or they may be learning about this and they never done an interview before. So I wanted this show, for as many episodes as we've done so far, to be kind of a guideline and a basis for those who are going to be getting bigger in their creative field and be in a more comfortable / more fun setting to be on a formal interview kind of table. The reason being is because you've been in interviews, I have as well. Some interviews are great, and then some are very, very hard-nosed and very, very direct to the point. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but for someone that's brand new, that could be very jarring.
Yeah.
So I wanted this to be an entry point for talent, especially those that are newer, up and coming, kind of getting their name out there, to be in an interview setting so they know the professional side of it, but also have a fun kind of personality sense and like showcasing themselves and why they are and what they do and why they do their why, basically. So that was the premise of it. It came in a sense of like the show coming out of nowhere because I had no plans to do this, but then I was like, I have no creative ideas. I got to think of some idea. Let's do a talk show. Let's do a podcast. And when I first started YouTube, over 10 plus years ago, that was the original premise, was to create kind of a mini talk show, but then it became sketches and comedy and live shows and all kinds of stuff. So it kind of went full circle, and now doing the show and doing it for the past 5 years now, going to be 6 years on and off, it's been pretty cool. Going back to your question, I'm going back to everything. It's kind of a tangent, but going back to everything, it's very important to know yourself when you're hosting and to know what you're trying to attain with that. When you're just coming in for a podcast and just shooting your stuff, that's great, but sometimes you kind of get misdirected when you're in that kind of premise for the show or when you're producing, and sometimes it can be kind of rough around the edges. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be super, super strict in structure with podcasting because you have that freedom for it. You can play around with it, especially when it's independently produced. But if you have no structure at all and you're just kind of winging it, yes, you can get some very creative conversations, but sometimes it goes in so many tangents that the viewer may have a hard time kind of understanding what's going on.
Especially if the host doesn't have the ability to actually string those conversations together and create like a bridge. Like I find myself as a host for my personal show, which is Pod the Lab. It's just a show that we have here where it's free form. We kind of treat it like a backyard barbecue conversation, just hanging out with friends kind of deal. And to your point, it first originated in a way where we didn't necessarily know what we were talking about. We were just going to have a conversation about things that we had experienced throughout the week. And since it was so fresh on our minds, whether it was interesting scenarios with clients or fun things that happened at the studio, or maybe news and pop culture that we tied into, like AI and Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff. And I noticed like that in those conversations, yes, there were points where you're like, okay, you get something good, because if you're a seasoned talker, you have talking points that you can go over, and you'll get those in pretty much every show you go to. But whenever you have a host that is able to connect the dots, have some sort of like direction, like, hey, this is going to be the theme of today's conversation, and then guide the group. Like if you're dealing with, instead of just two people, I think it's easier when it's two people because you can have like a streamlined conversation. Sure. When you have like a third element or a fourth element, a person, not that they're things, I feel like the conversation can go astray. It can be very hard to bring it back.
And it's good to bring that up and to combine with AI too separately, because I don't want to forget about that point either. I've had multiple guests where I had like 3 or 4 people that I'm interviewing. I've interviewed bands and artists and different photographers in group settings there. And like I'm going to use the maestro host as the host. Your job is to kind of lead the conversation back and forth and bring it back to a steady direction. It's like a plane. You want to make sure the plane is going nice and smooth and nice and going. You can take it up and down, but you don't want turbulence back and forth and causing like damages, because then it's like you can lose control of the show, and that could be obviously not a great thing. It's a little more challenging when it comes to doing groups and like 3 to 4 people, because you have additional variables, additional elements, and that could be tricky. But what I do is the same thing with my script. Even beforehand, what I'll do with the questions is I'll make sure when I'm leading my points, if I have a specific question, I'll highlight that person. And I'm going to say, let's say I'm going to speak to you, Angel, this specific question. And then let's say I'm going to use Baron. Shout out to Baron here. Baron was over here, and I'll be like, okay, well, that was a great answer, Angel, but I have this specific question with you, Baron. I want to ask you separately. It kind of ties in with Angel's question, but I want to get your perspective on it, you know? And then I kind of lead it that way to where everyone feels great with it, and I feel good with it, but there's also a sense of control and structure. With AI and going back with that, the tools for it is just that, a tool. Is it going to take over everything all at once? Who's to say? But right now it's not at that level yet. But you can use it as a great tool to help with the back end and post-production when it comes to doing your edits, and also when you're transcribing and posting these clips or posting an episode online on various social media platforms. And I feel like that's one of the best things AI has been for me, using it specifically for transcribing. You know.
Yeah, I've used various AIs, VIDYO.ai. That's actually gone through some improvements. Opus AI, which is big on the transcriptions. Descript is really big on transcriptions as well. But really, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is get, like, you could do so much with the transcription. You could create a blog article about your show to help with the SEO, or you could use it to put your description together, or find keywords that, you know, people could search for and stuff like that. But AI is getting really freaking good, man. Like, it's getting to the point where it'll write your description for you. It'll write your title based on your show. It'll give you keywords that you can add to your YouTube channel so that the searchability is better. Because a lot of people forget that YouTube is a discoverable platform. It's meant to find the underdog. It's meant to find people that are just starting out. It's just people get discouraged because it takes a little bit. Mr. Beast, I think, spent 5 years making videos before he saw his first million views. So it's like, imagine going 5 years and like the only people watching is your mom and your uncle or like your family, you know? It can get discouraging after a while, you know?
And as a relay, I always point out in the sense of like, the hardest thing is just starting and having that internal, like, okay, I'm actually going to try and do this. But then when you do it, the second thing is like, you could have those elements of discouragement. And like, if you're having that kind of situation, that kind of challenge, the best thing to do is just take a step back and realize why you're doing what you're doing, and maybe try it out of it from a different area or a different point of view. Maybe try it a different way if it's not clicking this way. If you feel like it's something that you really want to do, you can keep going at it. And if it's not, then you can leave this and then try something else and then maybe come back to it. With These Are Questions, season 1 was 2018. I didn't do season 2 till 2020. Okay?
Wow.
I waited 2 years because not that the season was bad. It's just because when I first did it and actually was producing it, I was producing in like outdoor locations, different areas. I didn't have an in-place studio. I knew some camera techniques and some stuff, but, you know, I was very independent and I was just trying to wing it and try different things. And like, it takes a lot of time and effort, and you could see from over time now until we see now in the studio how much the show has progressed. I waited 2 years for it, and I had no intentions for bringing it back. I brought it back because of necessity, because at the time in 2020, obviously we had the global whole pandemic here, and I'm not going to get too much into it because YouTube algorithm, social media algorithm, everyone's like, we can't say it, we don't like that. Yeah. But we had the ongoing global situation in 2020, and out of necessity, all the industries for acting and performance and TV was all shut down here and across multiple states. So I said, well, everyone's doing stuff online via Zoom or via podcasting softwares and stuff, and I said, well, maybe I should try that and maybe bring back the show, and maybe I should try it this direction and try these different guests and try something different. And then it's been building ever since to where we got to now season 7. So my whole tangent, I guess, point with that is that Mr. Beast, for example, waited 5 years. A lot of talented creators spend time. It's not you're going to get this in 24 hours. It's an overnight success. Some people say I'm the 14-year overnight success, you know? You know what I mean? Angel, you've been in the business for a very long time, and you've had your levels of success in too. So it's like, you know, you're not going to get it done in one day. It takes time.
I feel like the more you do it, now that we're talking it out loud, because a lot of times you talk these thoughts in your head, but the more you do it, I feel like it gets to be like public speaking. At first, you suck at it, and maybe people don't want to listen to you. At first, maybe it's hard for people to understand you or listen to the exact words you're saying. But the more you practice, the more repetitions you put into it, I feel like reps that you put into it, I feel like it gets easier for you to be yourself. And when you can be yourself, when you can be your authentic self, you're going to be able to create a better product, but you're also going to be able to touch the people that actually want to listen to you. Not everybody wants to listen to you. That you got to be okay with that. Not everybody, wants to subscribe to your channel, and that's okay. Like I actually have this thing where I've started to implement it, and I don't know if it's stabbing myself in the foot or not, but I just feel good about saying it, so I'm going to continue to do it. Whenever I start a show, I give them an introduction about what to expect in the show so that they can make their decision right there up front if they're going to stick around or not. The second thing I say is I tell them, don't like and subscribe right now. I want you to genuinely be convinced. If I have not convinced you in this conversation, then it's cool. Let's keep it pushing. Maybe the next show will get you there. But I don't want to just say it to say it. I want to give them a reason behind saying it. So it's like, I've introduced that. I'm experimenting with that. And to your point, I'm trying something new in a show that I got like discouraged about. I was like, well, I don't know if I should do this. No one's really paying attention. But then when I started to change things up, all of a sudden, more subscribers. All of a sudden, more people, right? So it's so funny how it works. It's just trying to try something, see if it works, doesn't work, change it, try something else. But I caution people to not just try things to try things. Make it purposeful. So if you're going to try something, make it so that you're changing an element of your show to make it better. Because I think that Mr. Beast, when he did he actually did a whole course at an Ivy League school for content creation. And he says that he learned all this stuff and he could literally tell anyone right now how to make a channel and they'll have 1 million views by next week because he already knows the formula to applying it. And it's not algorithm based because he can't predict the algorithm. It's just good content. Mm-hmm. And what people don't realize is that good content takes time. There's people that prepare like what you've done right here over 40 hours before making one video. Mm-hmm. And some people would be like, that's too much money, time-wise, to invest into a video. What they don't realize is that it's digital real estate. And this video that you made that right now maybe only has 10 views, when you do get monetization or when you do get to a point where you're seen, people are going to go back to see it. And that video that you thought didn't need that much time investment actually is going to yield you monetization. It's going to yield you money. So take your time, learn from people who have done it the hard way. I've kind of just pushed my way through. And just take your time. Really invest your time into making the shows because quick money is money that can go away very quickly. I think that's the saying in the streets.
But you didn't hear it from here. Shh, don't worry about it. Very wise words, and you're absolutely right. And like for the show itself, what made it so interesting is that you mentioned digital real estate. What's important about that is my show is based on guests. Yes, people want to see me, but they don't really want to see me. They want to see the guests. And when I build out the relationships and build the premise where they're interested and actually want to be on the show and want to be interviewed, that incorporates with other viewers. And when I'm looking for guests for future seasons or during the time, I will show them examples based on the interest that the guest is in. So let's say, for example, like I'll use, oh God, that's a good example. So I'll use like, if they're like a YouTuber / content creator, I'll use YouTubers that I had episodes with and use that as examples and say, hey, do you know this person? Know this person? I did an interview with them. And if they know the person, they're like, wow, you interviewed this person? Okay, you're legitimate, number one. And then two, it's like, oh, okay, I really like the premise of this show. When I introduce this show, the first thing I say is, hi, my name's Stephen Rafferty. Welcome to These Are Questions. This is the interview show where I ask people questions about things, life, and such not. Right off the bat, if you don't like that, you're just going to click away. If you did like that and be like, oh, I like questions about things and life and such not, and that's really generic. Some people go really in detail. But if they like that, then they'll continue on. And then the second thing I say, I introduce my guests. I introduce what they do, their occupation. So if they like photography, okay, I'm going to have viewers that like photography to watch this photographer in action. Or they like this model, whatever the case may be, or the personality. And the next thing I say is insert name here. Sorry, that's very, very basis there, but insert person here. I'm going to ask you a series of questions going to be based on your career and aspirations. So you have the career and aspiration part. Then I'm going to mix in a bunch of questions that are borderline idiotic and, well, randomly stupid. So there's the premise. You have the traditional straight interview, and then you have the kind of deviation from it. So to the viewer is like, oh, this guy's going to ask this person questions about their career, but then they're going to put in a bunch of stupid questions that they don't know. And then I say, do you agree to those terms? And then they say yes. That's very important. For a little bit behind the curtain, this is a professional show, and from season 1 to every single season I've done this show, I've made sure my guests sign some sort of release form. But then as a double, I ask them that in every episode. You watch it in every single episode. Every single guest that's been on it has agreed to it. And the reason why is because it's consent, and they know that this is what I'm going to ask them for this interview. There's no BS around it. This is what the premise is, because sometimes interviewers will go off script and do whatever. No, I'm going to tell you clear cut exactly what the show is going to be. This is what's going to go, and this is how we're going to do it. And then agreeing to it is verbal/physical/video consent that the person is going to be on this project. So no guests can say, oh, Steven didn't say this, or I didn't know it was going to be like that. No, it's very clear. So that's like the most important thing when I do my intro and go through it. But as a viewer, they can show and see like, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to get into the show, this is what I have for this episode.
Yeah, so that's a good perspective from behind the scenes. I feel like a lot of people should be doing it, and a lot of people don't do it because they're afraid to have the conversation around the agreement, the release form, getting the permission on video. And those are all amazing tips that every single person should do. I feel like you need to get confident first before doing that, or even before recording an episode, in learning about that and learning how you're going to present it. Because a lot of people may be scared at saying like, oh, they may not want to be on my show because of the really. Well, then that's fine. Like, don't put yourself in a situation where you could be misunderstood, or someone could be misunderstood and then they're upset at you about whatever. And then that's not to say that you can't go Wild Wild West, but the highest recommendation we can give is to use these forms. I haven't personally, just because, I don't know, man. Like, I used to be a paralegal, and so I know the importance of this stuff, but I feel like I've done a good enough job. It's not, don't listen, kids, don't do
I wasn't going to say.
Kids, don't do as I'm saying. Don't do as I'm doing, do as I'm saying, okay? Please.
What did we learn today?
We learned that we need agreements. And we need to have releases on video. All right, kids, get this happening on your shows. However means necessary you're going to do to protect yourself from any unforeseen circumstances. He is doing the right thing, not me. Don't do it.
I will say it could be a tricky conversation, especially for those that are newer, because it's like, oh, I don't really want to sign anything.
Yeah.
But legally, there has to be some protection in some aspects, right? And like the right guests won't have the issue of signing it, because if they've been on stuff, they know that this is a protocol. And to the point, some will be like, oh, wow, you actually have documentation, you have this stuff. And then, like, it shows that you're running a clean ship, you're running a tight ship. Listen, it gets kind of dicey because it's like collaborations and you're working around and you're doing stuff. And there's ways you can kind of play around with it. And for context, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not. I have a lawyer. You should get a lawyer if you're going to make this a big scale project. But let's say you don't have that and you're just developing, you're just trying to be creative. You know, having some sort of agreement and having that upfrontness with your guest is going to be important. And going back to, if they really appreciate what you're trying to do, they'll be accommodating with you. Yeah. If there's going to be a lot of hesitation and a lot of setbacks and they really don't agree, they have a right to have that. And you can ask questions and they can ask questions to make sure we're on the same page. But even after that, if they still are feeling uncomfortable, then don't push that. Maybe that's not the guest that you want for your show, and maybe you guys can work on other projects when things get more established. I always say, if this project doesn't fit for you, maybe there's another project that we can work together with and make the best quality, content, less projects, less work that we can do. Because this show's not for everybody.
Yeah.
your show's not for everybody.
True.
You know, so like, you know, knowing who your guests are and having ideas, great, but also knowing that like not everyone may not want to be a part of it, and that's okay too. Don't treat it as hard feelings. Just treat it as like, okay, this didn't work out, but I'm gonna get someone that's gonna fit for me. That's gonna make it even better.
That's true. I like it. I like that approach and thinking. I have a question for you, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I know that you have a background in broadcasting, public speaking, and in production. Like you've actually done some of the production stuff. Could you tell us how productions felt like, or maybe like an experience of when you first started this show, and then B, tell us an experience of now what it's like, including today's training that you've received. So.
This is the part where I just promote Collab Studios here, how amazing the studio is and what they do. So formerly, I've been on sets and productions from big and small, from big produced television productions and sets to doing commercial work, and then also just more on the independent side where just have the, bare bones of materials and equipment. And like the one constant's the same, whether it be big or small. If your showrunner / your producer has a strong foundation in what they're building, doesn't matter if it's big or small, the production is going to be very smooth. If the showrunner / producer doesn't have all their foundation set, you will see very clearly when things go off the rails. And it sounds comedic, but it's not, because time is money. If you're going to look at that in the bare bones way, and most people train you in that, where like time is money, and if like elements that are foreseen, that you knew of, that you didn't take the time and actually address it or have a plan with, you're going to see where that affects your bottom line and your production back and forth. It can be very damaging very quickly, and not just on the production side, it can also damage relationships with your talent, your crew. So like you really have to have your pre-production as strong as possible so the production can be elevated and be as smooth as possible, so where you can do the least amount of stuff for your post. Mm-hmm. That's the way I kind of do my mindset when it comes to like TV and film production, is like making sure your like all your steps before are as strong as possible, so where you have your production, and if things go awry, you have the best tools to mitigate it, to have the least amount of damage possible, to provide the best production possible, and to where your post is not overwhelmingly taxing on yourself and on your crew and who you're working with. Because all that plays a part. At the same time, you also want to build those relationships with your crew, with your talent, whether it be producing or just being a talent on set. Having a level of professionalism within is very paramount, because if you have an image issue, or there's problems with the set, or there's issue with talent, that all relays a back and forth, and you don't want to be known as like the production house or the talent that's causing a lot of these issues. Mistakes can happen, and that's totally fine, and like no set is perfect. There's never gonna be a perfect kind of thing, but like those things to mitigate is gonna be paramount, because if you don't do that, your reputation's gonna hurt from it, and then people don't want to work with you, and it becomes more challenging to actually be established in these industries.
That's true. Mm-hmm. That's true. And so now that you like have had the experience with these cameras and like all this kind of stuff, do you feel like you're prepared now, like to run your own show?
Yes. So going back with the good and the bad, so like we had a training session before, because I'm always trying to be a student of the game, even though I have extensive experience in different areas. If it's a new set, a new relationship, a new thing to build, I have to bring myself to be a beginner, because I may think I have stuff, but I don't know until I actually try it. So I look at it that way. Always look as a student, and then be as a teacher to teach those who could not be taught before. Collab Studios is a really cool production house, and I'll say it, I'm not getting paid to say this. These are questions, doesn't make any money to begin with. So like, this is genuinely coming from me. What I like about Collab Studios is that there's a lot of areas to play around and be creative here, because it's an open space. And like you're seeing here with the lights, with the setup, with the cameras, I'll put some pictures in the back if we're gonna release this episode. Angel, showed me step by step how to create the studio. And I have experience creating studios, but like it's been a while, and like maybe I want to touch new equipment and try out new things. And he let me have that flexibility and that time to sit down and work with him with his extensive experience. Baron from the photography side showing me a lot of different works. Durania from the backhouse production side showing me her tips and her tricks. Shout out to D, shout out to Baron, and just the crew in general. And like through their workshops, they've done quite a bit in showing not just myself, but other talents, ways that they can be creative in a specific skill, but also learning the steps to make these sets, the steps to make these workshops, the steps to work with your talent hand in hand. And I think that's very important, and it shows that you guys have a genuine sense of caringness when producing these works and projects. So in the simple answer, yes, I'm comfortable in running my show after what you showed me today. And yes, I recommend for other talents to get connected with not just Collab, but with other production studio houses that you feel fit as best, because the more knowledge you have, the more you know what is right and what you see as wrong, to where you could see on actual studio houses and big companies to know what is a correct way to do production and what's the way to show when it's not being done correctly. Knowledge is power.
I think the biggest thing when it comes down to production is a lot of people go through YouTube University, they go to hands-on experiences, maybe they buy their own equipment and they start doing stuff. And I feel like what ends up happening is you end up working so much that your quality gets really good. And then all of a sudden you're introduced to the mainstream production side of stuff. And that world is a whole nother world. For example, right now we are running this show with no one. You're the host, I'm the guest. We're talking, right? If you thought of this from a traditional production, from this show alone, we would at least need another 5 people. So if you went into the mainstream of this industry, you would need a gaffer, you would need a lighting person, a DP, so that makes sure we looking sexy.
We always looking sexy. What are you talking about? Always looking.
A director maybe, and an engineer, a producer behind the board, making sure they're switching live to whichever camera, right? As the industry has changed, as the equipment has become more accessible to everyone, as systems have become easier to run with less people, I feel like we're at a crossroad. I feel like we're at a point where traditional schools are teaching mainstream broadcasting or film production in the traditional sense, and that old guard is still there, holding on tight. And then you have people like YouTube influencers or YouTube production houses that can do the same level of quality, if not better, than the big houses without using that traditional system. So I feel like we're at a crossroad right now where people are going to bleed into one side or the other, and it's going to start to change. And I feel like that's a good thing. I feel like it should change, so.
To kind of relay off and just go with that, I agree with you. Things are changing. And remember, if you're a big-time mainstream production house, it takes longer to make those internal changes, because when you're smaller, you can change it quickly because you see it in real time. Bigger production houses have a harder time with that. And eventually they're going to adapt. But by the time they adapt, they're already going to be a little bit behind on the game. I feel that there's going to be a hybrid where you're going to have a variety of different sets, and production houses are going to do their own ways of doing what they get to have the same quality of work. And I keep reeling back to good and bad. One of my best experiences, not just with Collab, but just in general production house-wise, was when I was filming on a set for Sands. It's an independent film that's coming out very shortly. I was a director of social media, so I was on the back end. But what I really liked about the production was that the director and the production team were very cut and dry, and not in a bad way, but just very cut and dry of how they're going to run the production, how they're going to do it, and they're going to have all the tools that they need to make sure the production runs as smoothly as possible. And all the logistics were there because the director was originally a production assistant. So she had to do all the production work behind the scenes. She had to do all the paperwork, documentation, making sure the logistics are set in terms of parking, where to go, where the talent needs to go, where the changing stations need to be, like all that. So that kind of brain from a managing standpoint, led the production very smoothly. And it's one of my favorite productions that I was ever a part of. One of my productions where things kind of went off the rails, I'm not going to name them or anything like that because that's unprofessional, but one of them led to where there was issues with contracts in terms of getting talent getting paid, which that's a whole nother conversation. But clearly, if you're agreeing to someone and you're going to compensate somebody, you want to compensate them in the right way. But then on top of that, there was 3 to 4 hour delays in terms of the production time, so we're already behind. And for people that have never been on production sets, sometimes they're 12 to 15 hours, like a day, you know? They could be all day kind of things. And that's normal in the sense of that. But when things are delayed, that affects everything and it affects your timing. And then there were challenges with this, with the script writing where things had to get rewritten in the same scene because the location was having issues of what they wanted to do for the scene. So just like issues after issues after issues. And it goes back to where it's like if your pre-production was as tight as possible, your production wouldn't have nearly as much foreseen issues than if it would if it was run tightly. So my point of all this is that you're going to have not one set is going to be the same moving forward. You're going to have your traditional big main production houses, but within those, there's going to be these smaller and mid-sized ones that are going to try to, I don't want to say overtake, but they're going to try to be at that level using their own unique tools that they have, some of which bigger production houses are not going to see until way later.
Yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited to see the evolution of it, and I hope that creativity doesn't hinder because of it. You know, I feel like there's a sweet balance to strike with organization and structure and freedom to experiment. And when you find that sweet spot, you make magic. But when you don't, it can be clearly seen by the audience or even by the production team. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what's going to come. And I'm excited to see what you're going to do. This is not your final show. I feel like you're just, you're getting your chops in, you're doing your reps, and I'm sure a movie or something is going to come in the future from you.
Oh my goodness, these are questions. The movie? Ooh. Do I want that? I don't know if I want that or not. These are questions. The movie. How would that even go? I don't know how that go, but that could be an idea for the future. But I do know that this is not my last episode for at least this season. This is just a bonus episode. This is a bonus impromptu episode, learning a little bit about the behind the scenes of These Are Questions, and not just the behind the scenes of These Are Questions, but just learning about the insights of broadcast production and seeing where industry trends are going to go into potentially into the future. So I hope you had a great insight. I hope you had a chance to learn and kind of pick our brains a little bit with our extensive experiences there. And kind of to piggyback off, Angel, thank you for being my impromptu guest for today's impromptu episode of These Are Questions, the bonus episode, I guess, for the season. I don't know what we're going to call this. But to piggyback off, I don't think these are going to be hindered. I think things are going to flourish, but just in ways that people have not seen yet. So that balance of creativity and structure will coexist in a lot of different ways. And I think it's coming in a very quick period of time. So I don't want to say mark my words because there's no such thing as mark my words, but I'm going to say this to keep it in the digital internet metaverse, indieverse, multiverse, Mr. Beast's verse. Joke intended, and no one's laughing, so it's even better. Angel's laughing in the corner here, gonna return back on the moment. I don't know where this is going. But to piggyback off, things are changing, and things are gonna flourish in ways we have not seen, and I think it's gonna benefit both the creator and the organization if everyone plays their cards right.
I agree. I love it.
And with that, you have been watching / listening to this bonus episode. And fun fact, Angel, you're the only guest out of the entire series, and if we continue on, whatever, but an entire series that I've interviewed twice, indirectly. So congratulations.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
And with that, you've been watching / listening to These Are Questions. Get ready, more episodes are coming within the season, but we just want to give a little extra bonus episode for those that have been listening throughout our season. If you want to get more on the inside behind the scenes onto the show and a little bit about my brain of how I created this mad balling, wacky, ridiculous, stupid show. Okay? With that, I hope you're having a great night. Enjoy your night. Enjoy your morning. Enjoy your afternoon when you're going to watch this show. I don't know. You could be watching this at 3 o'clock in the morning. But if you are, go to bed. Watch it in the morning. With that, that's all I got to say. That's my outro. See, going back to having a strong outro. This is what happens when you're not prepared. Good night, everyone.
Bye. I love it.